In your negotiating days, was there an instance where it really didn't go the way you wanted it to go?
Yeah, and with 93% success rate means 7% of the time it's going bad. And that's just the nature of the game.
Is there one that stands out for you as being...
Well, every one of them does. But then the issue is, do you learn? Like Nassim Nicholas Taleb would call it post-traumatic stress growth. Like you go through a traumatic event, are you traumatized by it, and then damaged and never recover? Post-traumatic stress, injury, harm, disorder? Or is there post-traumatic stress growth, where you took that and decided to be better than you ever were before because you never want to let that happen again?
When I say this, what is the incident that comes to mind?
Well, the first one that people died in was the second case that I worked in the Philippines, the Burnham-Sabero case. And early on, before we could even get our arms around like a situation that was moving really fast, and the Philippine military was engaged in chasing the bad guys, and a chase had been on for weeks. Guillermo Sabero was murdered by the Abu Sayyaf about 21 days into that case. They had already killed a number of Filipinos prior to that. And as they moved across the landscape and the oceanscape and island to island south of the Philippines, they would kill hostages and pick up new hostages because there were people in their way all the time. So that was an ugly case from the beginning to the end. In the end of it, the two of the three remaining hostages were killed in a botched rescue attempt, and they were shot by friendly fire. Philippine Scout Rangers inadvertently stumbled over the Abu Sayyaf encampment, didn't realize it was one that had hostages in it, just opened fire. They recognized it as a terrorist encampment, formed a skirmish line on the trees on the uphill side, and just started pouring rifle fire down into the camp. And so that was the first time that I'd worked anything where people had gotten killed.
Does that stay with you?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I felt sorry for myself for a long time. And it's not like I'm happy about it, but I'll never remember the moment that I got the call 5:30 in the morning. I was in Washington, D.C., where I lived, and a voice on the other end of the phone said, "I've got bad news. Martin is dead." And it was just a few hours after Martin Burnham had been killed and Deborah Yap, the Filipino hostage, had been killed. Martin's wife, Gracia, was wounded and lived. And I'll never forget, that was the worst, to that point and since, was the worst personal moment of my professional career. And I used to say it's the worst moment of my personal career until I was hearing another hostage negotiator talking about a siege he was in, when an infant had died, had been killed. And I remember sitting there watching him talk about it, and he's still very definitely dealing with the scars and the wounds from having been the negotiator on scene. And I remember him saying, like, I don't know why I keep telling, giving these presentations, maybe I just want people to know something bad that happened to me on a winter's day. And I was sitting there thinking, bad for you. That wasn't your blood. It wasn't your child. And I thought, we're taking on too much because it wasn't a member of our family. It wasn't my brother, wasn't my significant other, wasn't my son that got killed. And that's when that's when I realized I had to put that stuff in perspective. It wasn't doing anybody any good for me feeling sorry for myself. I couldn't, and the changes we made as a result of the Burnham-Sabero case saved lives. That was our mandate. All right, so Martin Burnham is dead. What do we do with that? Do we quit or do we get better? If we get better, somebody else is going to live. And a whole bunch of people ended up living based on strategy adjustments we made as a result of that case.
Seems like a very significant sort of burden to carry, right? It goes back to what I said at the start. It takes a certain type of person to want to play with those stakes.
Yeah, somebody who's naive.
Yeah.
You just don't know any better.
makes us difficult sometimes. Just thinking about the traumatic things we go through, it makes us much difficult, especially in forming relationships. I struggled with that a lot. Struggled in having a girlfriend, probably because my home life was so traumatic that I would always run from commitment. But when you've lived in and you hear the same with like soldiers and stuff, when you've lived through such sort of traumatic events and high stakes, coming home to, hey babe, you're right, can be difficult, right?
Yeah, it can be. It can be difficult. Like you can have difficulty unwinding. The other person, depending upon how you process information. Like the other person might genuinely doing their best to be there with you to get you to talk about it. And if that isn't the best way that you process it, and yeah, one of the very difficult things about me is I don't process stuff by talking about it. I'll talk about it afterwards, but I kind of need to unplug. I'll need a good night's sleep. I'll need to let it run through the data banks and kind of bake on its own. I'm probably pretty good the next day.
Which is interesting because in your work you have no time for that.
Yeah, well, and maybe that's why I need it more at home, because in the work, I mean, we're gonna, we're going on it right now. We're dealing with it right now.